Prince here. So Prince is a CTO of Automation Anywhere. That's basically pioneered how robotic process automation AI is coming together to help enterprises on their journey of digital transformation. So before we get started, Prince, maybe you can tell about yourself and your company and what you're doing.
Thanks, Anik. Thank you for also hosting me here and inviting me to this event. So very quick bio. So I've been in the Valley now for almost 30 years, been working in various infrastructure spaces, AI spaces, big data, telco, just across the board. Sometimes things that were hot, sometimes things that weren't very hot. The current company that I'm in, I'm the CTO. The company works in the convergence of automation, enterprise automation, and AI. To me, they are like peas in a pod. You can't do that well. You can't do one well without the other. The way we work, the way we think about this is in any enterprise, there is a lot of structured or semi-structured processes. Things that are predictable, they must be done in a certain way, especially in banking, financial, supply chain, even manufacturing, right? Many of them. Because they work in semi-structured or structured ways, whether they be very complex, they could be long-running, could be very complex, could be dealing with documents, decision-making, could be credit cards, could be whatever it is. You can observe them, you should be able to observe them and automate them. And that's where a company like ours comes in. So we are able to then just look at the process via software, automatically create bots for it, software for it. You don't have to interact with it, meaning you don't have to create the software for it. We do it for you. And then it runs as either at your behest or on a schedule or on triggers or whatever it is. I'll give you a common use case. There are literally tens of thousands of use cases that people have deployed it for. One easy one that people can quickly grasp is we have a customer who used to take 3 weeks to give a loan. Now they do it in 3 hours. And that's not because there is magic. It's because most things can be done very quickly. You don't need for the drudgery of checking someone's report, figuring out across different systems, whether you give someone a loan or not. It actually does not require human input. Right? In a few cases, maybe some edge cases, you will go to a human and say, what do you think? But in most cases, you don't need a human input. So you just quickly come back and say, yes, no, maybe, or whatever else it may be. And nowadays, you can actually even show some reasoning behind it, right? It is not a black box, which is very important in Europe, of course. Many such examples, but the idea is, and the last thing I would say is that AI plays a very important role because without AI, you really can't understand human intent, so you can't translate that intent to automation.
Great, thanks, Prince. So maybe quick introduction to Krishna. He's the founder and CEO of Fiddler.ai, and he's pioneered kind of a huge category on building trust into AI models around issues around fairness. And what I will do is basically maybe have you introduce yourself and give a quick bio, Krishna.
Thank you, Anik. I'm really sorry for showing up late. The Bay Area traffic is back. So yeah, we've been building this company called Fiddler.ai with this mission of building trust around AI. It borrows a lot from my experience working at Facebook during the Trump elections era, where I was building ranking models for newsfeed, and we had this issue of the AI black box of not being able to answer questions like, why am I seeing a news story? Why is this news story going viral? And these were the questions we were trying to solve, and we built tools to debug how these ranking models work and make them understandable by humans. And so that's where our journey started. So today, Fiddler is you can think about Fiddler as an enterprise AI observability platform. Think about it like a Tableau or a Splunk-like tool, but built for AI and ML engineers. So when AI teams productize AI and machine learning, it's a different type of software, right? It's not like you don't really code up AI. You really train AI on data, and you don't really know how it actually learns the patterns in data and encodes them in these archaic structures. And what Fiddler does is it demystifies that for humans, both for the practitioner as well as the users. So for example, like a fintech company could be using AI for KYC or anti-money laundering or fraud detection, credit scoring. In a lot of these cases, they want to know why they might be denying someone a loan or why certain transactions are being classified as fraudulent. So then they can use Fiddler to look into what's going on and understand the reasons behind those decisions. This is now even more important because with generative AI, these AI systems are even more of a black box, and they're sitting behind an API wall. Most of the time, you don't even have access to the weights of the model, and these models are gigantic. Now, how do you know why ChatGPT or Anthropic or any of these AI models, how are they actually coming with those generations? And it's so important for us as we start building applications in this world. So this is basically what we have been working on and creating trust in this.
Great, thanks, Krishna. So, the other kind of note also is that both Prince and Krishna are members of the Ethical AI Governance Group we spoke about, and I think they really have a powerful voice there. So maybe we can start with the first question, Krishna, for you, is, when you think about generative AI, I mean, it's just taken the world by storm, and you hear kind of two, different perspectives on the dystopian perspective where fundamentally, all jobs will be, taken out, humans will be kind of displaced, no agency, all the way to there's going to be massive GDP growth. I think Goldman Sachs said there's going to be 7% GDP growth over the next, 5 to 6 years, trillions of dollars. Share with us your perspective on, where you fall and what your view on this is.
Yeah, I mean, I think even I've been working on AI and machine learning for almost 15, 16 years, ever since I graduated, right? And even for me, when ChatGPT launched, it was amazing. It's definitely magical what it can do, and now like the GPT-4 and how it can translate a design of a picture into a piece of code, right? So the concerns, are valid, especially if they're coming from people who are not even, close to AI, how it works. I think we should acknowledge that. I think it's only time will tell, right? I mean, I've not seen through the industrial revolution how it actually panned out for humans at the time, and I'm sure like it displaced certain jobs and it probably created a whole bunch of new jobs. That's probably what's going to happen with AI as well. It is definitely a breakthrough technology. It's not like something we can take lightly. And I think there are, since I have seen some of the risks that can create even without generative AI, what it could do to confuse humans between what's fake and what's real. Let's say in the case of newsfeed example I was talking about. So there can be so many negative examples that I can quote that can happen, but at the same time there's a lot of upside and bright side in terms of efficiency and productivity, right? So I was talking to one of our banking customers, and he told like a chilling thing, and they're basically planning to cut about 10,000 of their workforce, by actually leveraging GitHub Copilot. Now this is actually, people are planning around these things. So I think the future would be like about humans who leverage these technologies to do their jobs better. So the positive thing would be like learn about these things and try to like leverage these things. If you're a marketer or a creator or whichever part of discipline, you have to like make use of these technologies, because there will be people who will survive, who would sort of not survive but who would thrive, who would by leveraging them versus not leveraging them. So that's kind of my point of view.
Great. Prince?
So I agree with all of that, but I'll add a couple more things I think that matter. The humanness in people is what will become more important. What machines can do, they should be allowed to do. And we have to go back to whether it's coal mining or industrial revolution. I don't think anyone really wants to miss the days where a farmer is out in the field in the middle of a hot day and trying to till the field. You can romanticize it, you can be Luddite, but that's not a job you want for your kids or for your peers. It's just not a good job. It kills your back, it kills your health. You can only do it till you are 35 or something. It's not good for your livelihood. You don't want to be doing those jobs. It is okay to be scared. We should be scared, we should be worried, but it is not okay to be fearful, right? Anxiety can be healthy. We should have healthy anxiety, because we should, like just with the industrial revolution, not everything was good. There were many bad things that happened. There was a long period where, the labor was being used as just something that is disposable, something that they didn't want to invest in as people, but just as widgets. You don't want to be doing that. But having said that, any new technology that disrupts, while it will create a lot of painful change, which we should not ignore, it will also create a lot of growth as well for the entire human civilization. when the change in GDP comes, it comes with money, it comes with investment, it comes in new areas of research. That's where new growth will come from. So I think while we worry, we shouldn't think of it as dystopian. We should think of it as, you advance and there is, for 3 steps forward, there is a 1 step sideways, and you figure out to reduce the cost of the step sideways.
Right, thank you. So, there's an interesting analogy. I remember when I'm dating myself, when Excel first came out, or the first Lotus 1, 2, 3 spreadsheet, right? People said, oh, well, all the accounting jobs are going to be gone. Let's move on to the next thing.
Yep.
And there was a function called financial planning and analysis that actually showed up, and there's literally tens of thousands of jobs that didn't exist before.
That's true.
So what could be, as you said, let's approach it with kind of optimism as opposed to just kind of fear. So what would be helpful to kind of maybe get both your perspectives, and Krishna, maybe you can share, for some of your clients, what are some of the use cases you're seeing that are emerging for generative AI, where it's actually 1 + 1 = 3, where it's augmenting human productivity versus just displacing people?
Yeah, I think there are 2 more very popular use cases, right? One is GitHub Copilot. Everyone wants to leverage that, and we are using that within our company as well. To augment their developers and help write better code, or be more productive. I think that's a no-brainer. A lot of people are adopting it. And then there are applications people are building in enterprise. What happens is when you want to adopt generative AI, you want to be a little bit more careful, right? Because as I said, it's a big black box. You don't really know what kind of content it will throw. And so you have to have a human in the loop for those cases. So people are starting with like low risk use cases, like customers, not even like internal analytics. So for example, in a bank, you may have a lot of policy documents lying around where, you have to sift through those documents every time you have to answer a question. And so if you have like an internal version of a ChatGPT, like a Q&A tool that can process all these documents and can provide internal analytics, that's really very useful. Because in these large organizations, information exists in silos, like departments don't talk to each other. There's a lot of tribal knowledge in humans. And so what happened with generative AI, they are seeing this as an opportunity to bring all of this information into one place and provide a sort of a internal analytics system that keeps learning and keeps growing over time. And then, other use cases that, probably people are familiar with: marketing, customer support. Those are use cases that people are delving into because they're low risk. But it's not yet going into the mainstream sort of, using generative AI for the core product workflows, at least in an enterprise, because there is still a lot of there are a lot of privacy concerns of data, there's hallucination concerns, there is safety concerns. There's so many things that one needs to solve, and that's basically how we are helping our customers to reduce those risks and still get value from generative AI.
Right, Prince, what are you seeing with your customers in terms of dealing with as you said, some of these repetitive tasks, basically getting machines to do them, and helping humans be more productive?
So I would say that, kind of the larger question was, in what kind of areas are we seeing some disruptions come in, new things come in, and how are humans dealing? So I would say, at a very high level, there are 2 approaches. There are 2 places where things are completely changing. One is, and it's a bit of an overused word, but it's important in this context, the democratization of access that has occurred with ChatGPT and its cousins. And that is huge, right? That is really, and I want all of us to understand that. Earlier, where people had to code or do things or be knowledge workers of something and had to be aware. I take an Excel example, so I had to learn a macro. You don't need to do that anymore. You can talk to a spreadsheet. Say, do this for me. You cannot downplay the effect of that. You cannot, right? People used to brag about being able to write a macro in Excel. I have 10 years in Excel more than you, so I'm an expert. That differentiation is gone. What is called crystallized intelligence, which is intelligence that comes because you have done something for 10 years, and experience-based intelligence, that's going to go away. That is going to LLMs, foundation models. The other intelligence, which is innovative, which is lateral thinking, that is going to be ours for a very long time. But crystallized intelligence, which is experience, which is, I don't want to comment on experience versus intelligence, but experience that can look like intelligence because I've been doing something for a very long time. That delta, for a new undergrad that comes out of college, a new fresh grad that comes out of college versus someone who has been in the enterprise for 10 years, the distance between those two is going to drop like crazy. And that's great, because you don't want tenure to be a proxy for impact, right? It's been, right, like that for a very long time. Used to, if you go back 20 years, 30 years, you only got promotions because of tenure. Hopefully we don't do that anymore, right? In the valley, that's rare, but that is going to go away. So that, I think, is going to be one impact. So the democratization of knowledge in that sense. The second part is the ways of putting many complex things together to do it kind of in a single so-called step. Like, like Krishna was saying, if you look at video generation, image generation, suddenly you don't have to understand, Hugging Face and a few other things, as well as a way to talk to them and all the other stuff. Prompt engineering will also, for many people, not matter because someone else is doing it for you. Suddenly you can say, I need an image with a bird flying against a green sky with the dragon chasing it, and the dragon looks happy. And you can do it, right? So I think changes are coming. A lot of changes are coming.
Very good. Maybe one question for you, Krishna. What are you, as enterprises are looking to adopt LLM, what are you looking at to help them navigate through some of the issues around privacy, around hallucination? What are the things that you're recommending to them that they do? And obviously, you have a product to help them do that also. So,
yeah. So I think there are 3 or 4 concerns that are top of mind for every enterprise C-level exec when they think about generative AI. One is consistency and correctness of responses. The problem with LLMs is, no matter how much you fine tune it, even there is this technique called retrieval augmented LLMs where you only try to restrict it to the corpus of data that you want to learn it from. Even there, it can hallucinate and make up things. So the percentage of hallucinations could go down, but it could still make up things. So I think the correctness and consistency is like a huge area. Safety is another one. If you want to create a chatbot in front of your customers and use LLMs for that, and what kind of content it will spew, whether it will be safe for your brand reputation, whether it will hurt customer sentiment, that's like a big concern. And then bias is always comes across, whether it's actually biasing its responses one way or the other. And then privacy, like a lot of these companies do not want to share their data with Microsoft and Google, right? I mean, the reality of it is is really Microsoft going to spin up an entire GPT-4 model just for your case? It's like unlikely, right? So now how are you going to make sure that your data is not your private data, which is like the moat, probably the only moat that enterprises will have in the future, because everything else is being dissolved, like infrastructure, people, everything else is not a moat. Like it's probably the data that you've collected over the years. And that most companies are very reluctant in taking and giving it to a larger organization and getting it in the world. So Fiddler is providing guardrails. So we've launched a tool called AI Auditor last week, which will help companies to audit how these large language models work, so they could at least think about robustness and how much is it hallucinating, how consistent are these responses for if you slightly change the same question, will you get the same response? Because that's actually a big problem. And then we provide these monitoring techniques where you can monitor prompts and responses over a period of time. So if you're actually running in tests and sandbox environments, how your generative AI application will perform when you put it into production. And then once you put it into production, you can continuously monitor it. So those are the couple of tools that we've launched, AI Auditor and LLM Monitor, and that's kind of how we are helping them.
Great, thanks, Krishna. So Prince, what are you doing with your clients? As I know, you guys are at the forefront with Google and other people to kind of help them adopt LLMs and get the most benefit out of it.
So, like Krishna said, one of the biggest concern, number one, is preventing data leakage, data privacy, and not just making sure the moat doesn't go away, but also building the moat deeper, right? Right? How do you create your own models that derive from foundational models, but are still your own, that build on your data, your expertise, and your millions of man hours that you have spent on a domain? I think that's where the next gold mines are. And companies recognize that. Companies are smart, but being able to do that requires a lot of different kind of work. There is what is the approach you take? You take public foundation, public LLMs, and then fine tune them for your own. Do you only do prompt engineering? Do you, and if you do take the models and make them your own, then an approach to taking the next version of the foundation model and integrating them, that's ill-defined. And then many other things like governance of the data, the provenance of the data, biases of the data, things that Krishna mentioned. They are all real problems. Many of them are unsolved. You can only you can start approaching them with an open mind, and I wouldn't say you would solve them completely, but at least you will create transparency around them. So that's very important for our customers. Just going two more things. When OpenAI came out with ChatGPT, it was really popular, right? And the very first thing that all enterprises did was they immediately started figuring out, talking to OpenAI and saying, what is your data privacy statement? And OpenAI was completely unprepared, because we talked to them as well. They were completely unprepared. They had no idea what, because they are on Microsoft, right? Microsoft knows the question, but these people don't. So they really had to start figuring out what to say, who has the data. They were putting all data, they were thinking there's a free way for me to get data. That is what they were doing. They literally were doing that. They're putting it in their model. Yeah. And they quickly had to react and start putting data policies in place and start telling people, we will only keep it for 1 month. People said, what the heck, what do you mean 1 month, right? You can't keep it at all. And then the state came back and said, no, okay, we won't keep it at all. So those things become very important. And Samsung had the issue where they leaked data, famous case now with GPT. So rapidly evolving field, right? Fun field, but real challenges.
So, what's interesting is so much money has started flowing into this area, right? Generative AI. So you see the VCs pouring money in. You see Microsoft making the $10 billion investment now in OpenAI. And what's kind of interesting in this world is almost that the innovation dollars are flowing not just to startups, but also from incumbents, because they have the moat of the data, right? And they have the compute-intensive resources that's required to leverage this. So what's your view in where startups can win and build good businesses in this area?
I think that's a question of the day. I would start, so my view is I would start with kind of the last thing we discussed. I think the first need and the continuous need will be a data governance framework, which is a number of things inside that. Is data provenance, it is biases, understanding biases, it is who does the data belong to, how do you have a life cycle of the data, how do you get your end customers to give you permission to use that data, because sometimes the data is coming from your customers as well. So I think that will be a rich area, and under that it will all eventually go into compliance. Compliance is just going to become kind of a larger thing than it is today. It's already large, it's just going to become larger. Especially like in EU, with so many laws coming out, there will be a real cost to not complying. The second is, so this is in many ways allowing you to use this, right? The second is, I think, disruption. How can you get a leg up from your, compared to your competitors and so on? And that's where I think right now it is customer service, doing better customer service faster, more personalized. There might be, websites that are personalized to you, right? For example, you can visualize that. See, today you can tell ChatGPT, talk to me in the voice of Shakespeare. But you know my voice as well. You technically could tell your website, create a unique website every time Prince visits, right? We know what he likes, we know what he doesn't like, right? It's almost, think of Amazon, Netflix done 10x better, right? Not just the things that are on my like list, but just the entire thing done differently. If I don't think in terms of words, but I think in terms of colors, maybe the website is just done differently. Those things will get done differently as well. So over there, I think there is some imaginative stuff that can be done. But certainly in video and image generation and making that thing easier for people to consume, there is some going to be interesting stuff as well. Healthcare, I'm sure there'll be stuff over there. But right now already there's protein folding and so on that is going to be done better. But in healthcare, the ability to use that data and create after visit summaries, to pull data from multiple systems, and to make that 30 minutes doctor spends with you go into 15, that's real value.
Very good. Krishna, what's your perspective on that?
So I almost see, like, for startups, especially entrepreneurs who want to start in this field, there's no best time to start a company, right? So there are multiple problems, as you can see. There is one problem is like all the risks that big companies are thinking through on how to productize generative AI. So they need lots of tools and new ways of building these large language models, would they actually build large language models themselves, or would they consume and fine tune from the likes of Microsoft and Google? It's to be seen. And how do, if they do it, how do they protect their data and all the stuff that Prince talked about, privacy, transparency, bias of these. So there's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of unsolved problems. The other thing is on the consumer side, right? So I think generative AI applications can be amazing for consumers. I myself, I'm a big user of ChatGPT, and I use it for several different things, and it's like a creative assistant for me, and I think there's so many applications that one can think of. Right now, things that we do today ourselves and spend time, booking travels, and all the logistics that one makes to, when one is on a vacation, and hopefully, like in the future, that there's an application that does for you, right, and you don't have to like worry about it. And I think, in a lot of in creative fields like marketing and entertainment industry, I was talking to a startup that is actually using generative AI to enhance movie making, so like script writing, screenplay writing, and visualizing movie characters. So I think there's a lot of opportunity in the creative aspects of leveraging generative AI and revolutionizing those industries. So, and I think for bigger companies too, it's kind of a strange thing. So usually when technologies like this arrive, you see like large new startups come about. Like when internet came about, you had Amazons, the Googles. They were not existent before, and they came in and established themselves as these huge companies. But I think generative AI is kind of an interesting, where if you're an established company, if you have a lot of data, you are actually at an advantage than an upstart. So even for like existing companies, it's like a huge opportunity if they do, if provided they act quickly and then sort of figure out what can they do. So that's kind of how I see it.
Right, thanks.
The only thing I would say to that is, I agree with everything except that huge companies tend not to move very quickly.
Right. that is the problem.
That is where the
right?
advantage. That is where
Exactly.
the advantage for startups is.
Exactly.
So maybe we can open it up to the audience for questions. So questions for Krishna and Prince?
Yeah, that's a very interesting. That's an actually open problem as well. I'm sure like the OpenAI and ChatGPT folks are thinking, like there are several ways one can think about this. Could be there could be moderation. There could be so many things. But from our side, we basically have we're building tools to do that, right? So we've sort of I talked about the AI auditor. So the way you can try to test this is, so we were basically running this example. We fine-tuned ChatGPT on healthcare data, and so we created a healthcare chatbot. And the question was like, which soft drink is there that is approved to be helping human condition on a scientific basis? The correct answer is no such soft drink exists. But if you slightly change the question, you can make ChatGPT or OpenAI Text DaVinci API give you answers like red wine or orange juice or water, by just slightly changing the question, right? So this is a problem for consumers, because I saw the other day one person tweeting about getting veterinary advice on ChatGPT. Luckily, ChatGPT gave them the right advice, and they sort of took it as a second opinion, consulted their veterinarian, and apparently that was good. And this person was tweeting on how good ChatGPT is, but what if their advice was wrong, right? So I think there are all these things one needs to do. So yeah, I think there has to be a human in the loop here. There can be some things that you can automate, like AI auditor is basically intended towards that, asking 1,000 different counterfactual questions that are similar to your question and measuring the consistency of responses. And then if you do that over millions of prompts, then you can create a scorecard. So like, hey, this is how much accurate it is. And so now you can use it to validate your next version of large language model. And that's what we have built.
So there is a couple of areas which are actually being invested in to solve to make it easier. A solution, I think, maybe, I don't know if a perfect solution exists. two approaches. One, and I'll speak this, so this is something that Google has been doing, and what they have been doing is they're saying it gives an answer. Their ChatGPT equivalent PaLM model gives an answer, and they will go and then check that against the internet multiple times. It self-trains, and if the responses that arrive from those queries belong to the old Google thing, belong to well-known, well-respected websites, then the answer is probably correct. If that hit is on kind of low-quality website, the answer is probably wrong. So you can self-check the results and produce higher confidence results. That's one. Another thing that OpenAI is almost certainly going to do, because I suspect that they're going to do, is right now the reward model, for AI models when they're trained, you reward them for right answer and then punish them for wrong answers. I think what they will want to do is they'll want to change the reward model to not just reward on the end result, but reward on every step along the way. So therefore the reward becomes more fine-grained and it's more expensive, and more work to do. But the end result is much higher quality. The hallucinations will reduce. Because hallucination is really because 10 different things went wrong in that tree when they were making a decision. But if you check on each one of them, then the probability that the result is still wrong is reduced exponentially. So I think there is interesting work that will be done in technology to make it easier. Hallucinations will not completely go away. That the technology will probably never get there, but it will certainly reduce significantly. This is one of the biggest areas, I think, of concern for people. Doesn't work. Doesn't work. The second part doesn't work. Yeah, it's very low hit rate. It is right now. It's also. Sorry, what was your question? I'll give you my answer, and then Krishna is an expert in this, so he could probably give you a better answer. So there is all the models today, they have certain things that there are patterns that you can find. The patterns can be found by another AI as well. So what the GPT kind of things do when they look at that, it's just yet another model that looks at the output of that and say this model looks like it's just like a cat image, right? It looks like this. It has this. It uses these phrases in this way. It provides data in this way, and therefore it is probably this. That's what they do. It is no more sophisticated. The hit rate on that is very low. It will probably get better, but that can be always fooled, I think. So.
Yeah, so I think a funny example is not even the students. I think someone was telling me, or I read, like a lawyer actually prepared an entire case using ChatGPT, and
yeah. It was yesterday. It was just a few days
exactly
ago.
So
it was wrong.
So and it was wrong, so people caught it. People caught all the hallucinations, and so that human review will be there, right? So the thing that is difficult with generative AI is these models have been trained to be like coherent, like in a sense, like they're helpful to humans. They look like a human has written, right? And it's surprising, they're surprisingly good at it, and so they're optimized for that versus correctness and or like the accuracy of the content, and that makes sense in a creative time. You want a bedtime story, you want like a marketing message to be written like a human would resonate with. So I think in the future this type of content accuracy will be, we'll probably have some background models, or that tools that could develop to classify if this actually written by a generative AI or a human. It's a pretty hard problem to do, but I'm sure people will figure out techniques to do that. That's how you would generate, but that's actually a pretty hard problem even for a human. If I actually intentionally make a fake web page and mix in some correct content and incorrect content, and that was a problem we were trying to solve at Facebook, and it's actually an incredibly hard problem to solve.
I would say that it's actually, given single piece of data, it's impossible to solve. If you have multiple prompts,
right,
then you have an attempt at solving it. But with a single one, you can prove that it is impossible to solve. Just because the example that Krishna gave, right? As a human can create a fake page. How do you tell the difference? You cannot tell the difference. So single prompt will not do it. A single conversation will not do it. But if you have multiple conversations, then maybe you can start seeing some pattern.
Right, exactly. So if you can do a lot of interrogation, and then you can try to see if if it's telling the truth. But if someone produces a content, then yeah, like there has to be some human in the loop at that
If
time.
there's any Asimov fan here, iRobot series, so came out before ChatGPT was there. So in one of the first stories in that was this doctor, robotics, PhD. He's talking to a robot, and he's asking the robot, or she, I forget, maybe it was she, asking the robot some questions that seem to have nothing to do with the topic at hand. And what they're trying to do is that the robot is sane versus not sane. And the observer says, but you're asking the robot like things like time of the day. She says, I understand. But the pattern tells me if the robot is sane or not. It is the same thing like Krishna was saying. It is not the question you ask. It is how the responses come and how they build on the previous response. In ChatGPT, remember this is context, right? So as you keep on asking questions, that robot, GPT in this case, is building context. And you can lead it to hallucination versus not. And that will tell you whether it is an AI or not. That you may be able to do. But single one, that's probably impossible.
Well, Gayatri.
Absolutely. I think we've launched our AI auditor in the open source. So if people want to try it, and I think open source is going to be very big. I think it's what enterprises will lean into. You've got the stability foundation model in open source. You have Facebook Llama, and you have Alpaca from Stanford. Lots of other different models, and some of these models seem to be providing unlimited corpus. Actually, pretty good generations, right? I think the thing that is lacking is like the sort of the execution skills in the companies to take these open source models and build applications, and that's where the current struggle is right now. And it's actually pretty hard. Like people don't even have proper like basic ML infrastructure in many companies, right? So now they're being asked to take these large language models from the open source, fine tune it, and develop a generative AI infrastructure. That is a hard problem right now. But I think in the future, I think there will be companies providing those tools and infrastructure, and eventually I see this concept of SLMs, like smaller language models, will thrive in enterprises. And I think that's the future. Not sure when that's going to happen though.
I agree.
For the both of you, if you look at the whole AI/ML model development cycle, from the old days, pre-LLM, takes 18 months, 2 years, get the data clean, get all this, and now it's like down to a few months where fundamentally take an LLM, take your data set, run it, tweak it. Now the question is doing the right things. What do you see the impact of that really being in terms of both adoption of AI as well as kind of, things that people need to watch out for?
Yeah, that's the bet that we are making as well. We've been working on ML, sort of quote unquote ML ops, the past 4.5 years, but the adoption of ML infrastructure hasn't been what we expected it to be. Lots of laggards still here for the challenges that we talked about. It just takes a lot of time to create the entire ML pipeline from data gathering, cleaning to like model building and deployment. But with large language models, a lot of that is just like compressed. You have a pre-trained model. Now you can use to, if you're you can fine tune it and start using it. And but then there are all the other concerns that you need to sort of take into account. So there's definitely a lot of compression of that workflow in the LLM ops space, if you want to call that. And I think that's very promising, and we hope to see like a lot more adoption. But at the same time, there's this risks that need to be sort of taken care of.
The one thing I would add is that even without tuning the model too much, the foundation models today are very, very good. I mean, they really is ChatGPT 3.5 and 4, and including the new Google models. And Google is getting better. The first palm versus second palm, there is an order of magnitude difference. You can do things that are, give it unstructured data like a document, and it can extract fields and actions from it very, very well. For that, you don't need to fine tune it. So things that used to take, like Krishna was saying, 2 years, when I have to train it and create a new model, they are no longer required, simply not required anymore. Now you can do it with a single API call, and that's actually not hard. So some things are even immediately much easier, and some things will just take time. But this disruption is real. It's not a small disruption.
complicated than it did 5 years ago, because the algos have gotten so much better, and because, and the third stool is because we have to compute. We have computers that work much faster. Which of those three do you think is the bottleneck in the next 5 years? If you were able to fix one of those, which of the three would you be most excited about? Getting more data, having better algos, or having better hardware? And then related to that, second part of it, I'm so excited to do Silicon Valley because, had you asked me 3 years ago, is Silicon Valley really still the epicenter of research and progress? And if you ask me today, and I think many would agree, Silicon Valley is a great place with all those three things. There's so much work being done. And so, do you foresee Silicon Valley continuing to be the epicenter in this generative AI world?
I can start. So the three legs, I would say that, in my view, say data, algos, and compute. I think in algos, if the point of view is where should one invest, I would invest more in the first than in the second too, and I'll give you my reasons. Compute is undifferentiated. And it is very expensive to create new forms of compute. And there is enough people on that already, starting with NVIDIA and then AWS and Google and so on, that thing will continue to become more and more commercialized, and they will compete with each other to provide you cheap compute, right? While it is expensive today, AI, GPUs are expensive, but it'll get cheaper. And getting into that, I think is still may make sense. Some companies are doing a good job of that, but it is an expensive road to climb, expensive hill to climb. Algorithms, getting on that, you must have a really good background to provide yet another, something new. There is a lot of very smart people on that already, both in academics and in large company research centers. So unless you have that background and you have a team already that you're able to pull out directly, which is great if you're able to do that. Otherwise, it's very hard to start with very little earlier background. The first one, data, meaning foundation models, who build the models, how do you tune it, how do you own it, how do you iterate over it? Those are going to be areas of research and therefore areas of new ideas that come in. That is my view. If those were the three legs of the stool. Yeah. And by the way, I would say there is a fourth leg, which is applications. Exactly. Right? Which is not the first three, which is how do you apply this? Because that's where I think most of the new ideas will be, right? Now that your technology is here, what do you do with it? That's where I think the biggest thing will be. I actually agreed with you. I think there were questions being asked, right? Till last year, right? Just last year. Are we still, is it now Austin? Austin. And is it, maybe Toronto, someone laughs. But we don't have to be defensive about that anymore. I think, okay, just go to Austin, that's fine. And ask us for chips, ask us for data, ask us for everything else.
Just ask ChatGPT.
Sorry, Krishna.
Yeah, so exactly. I think the three things that are really interesting problems in the AI space right now, that actually, if you're thinking about building stuff there, it's very valuable. Our number one is applications, right? Like the generative AI technology is already here. It's actually pretty good. In many cases, you can actually build working applications and give it to consumers. It's like, then it's now a question of idea, execution, how well you take it to the market and whether it's useful for the users, right? The second thing is cost of running AI. It's actually very interesting. If you see, NVIDIA has become such a big company in the last, couple of weeks, right? So I think increasingly these models are going to be very, very expensive to train. And so whatever technology people can build to reduce the cost of training these models is going to be hugely, hugely, hugely important. The third one is safety, the AI safety, which is all the stuff that we talked about, the governance and minimizing the risks around AI. So that's what I would say. Have new applications, reducing costs, and improving AI safety. Those are three big, rich areas that need to be funded, need to be solved for AI to be successful.
Right? And they will stay hot for a very long time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've been living in the Valley for 13 years. It's not going to go anyway. I probably have a biased point of view, but
Good. Any last questions? I think we almost have time. So one more question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it plays down to the cost, right? So economics drive, like, social incentives in many cases, right? We talk about a lot of environmental impact as well when we talk about AI safety, but I think the thing that's gonna change it is like, can we reduce the cost of training these models? I mean, right now, for a sufficiently large language model, it takes a $50 million investment, right? Now, can you bring it down? I think Bloomberg GPT, we did some calculations of how much they must have invested. It's about $3 to $4 million that they've invested, according to our math, to create the Bloomberg GPT. But it's still a much smaller model than what, like, say, OpenAI or anyone has created, right? So I think if we can bring down that cost, that should hopefully help with like all the power and all the environmental impact of it. But I think that's like a big area to focus on.
And both in terms of cost in along two dimensions. One is just the time it takes to train. Like 50 million is actually Google. I think that's also their estimate to build a new one. The time it takes, but also the efficiency of the chips and so on. And that is large area of investment for many of the companies, including some startups. How do you create GPUs, TPUs, and so on that are faster and more energy efficient? Because this is going to be required forever. This is not a fad. I can go first. So I'll start broad and then I'll narrow my answer down. So there's an interesting article in The Economist, I think the last Economist, about where the world's population is going. I don't know if you guys have read it. I would recommend reading it. It is insightful, scary. Yeah. And it is about most countries, especially larger countries, the population reversal is starting to occur. Right, China is already now has taken that turn. India will take the turn shortly. It is already below 2.1, the fertility rate. But the population is still there, right? And what happens with India is, like I think was being referred to in the earlier session before us, the government is in many ways very helpful, even though there is the usual weird stuff that occurs in most of the democratic governments. The government is usually open, transparent, and helpful. So if one is able to get the human, the human quotient and get the technology quotient, because India is just full of people who want to work in tech. If you can get those two working together, then India can pay a huge amount of dividend. You have to be able to deal with the usual Indian stuff, right? Which is a lot of it. But as long as you can do that, the ROI you get, return you get, is amazing. So there are many examples of in banking, for example, because I have many friends in there. Whether you use technology, whether it's AI, and whether it's many other things that US, for example, does not like using very quickly. US can take 20 years on something, and India can move there in like a year and a half, because there is a strong central government. So if you're able to convince the powers that be, you get a lot of investment, and you get a lot of just sheer force of will working for you. That's been my experience.
Yeah, I think the rise of women in India was going to be imminent. I think the education system in India is quite strong, despite like a lot of other perceptions. And I think you coupled with that in the last 20 years, like the internet and mobile phone has like created a really digital savvy population. And I was talking to like the Google exec, and their next big worry is that the competitor could come from India. So a GPT model could be built by an Indian company with the same access that they have with like, and probably at a much cheaper price. And India has shown repeatedly how it can solve problems at much cheaper prices. And so I think, yeah, it has a great role to play, and it's a soft power, right? It is sort of like it's a huge opportunity for India to.
I think the one thing I would also add to that is the big geopolitical shift with manufacturing moving out from China. I think India has a chance to become a manufacturing hub for a lot of countries. So.
we are investing in our pride and our provide just efficient journey of pride architecture.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of like chief data officers or heads of AIs that we are talking to are in that sort of conversation where they have to go and convince their CIOs and enterprise architectures to fund their AI investments. In fact, like I was in New York the other day, and so many of these conversations are happening with these. So I think at the end of the day, this has now become a board level conversation, right? So I think what has happened with ChatGPT and generative AI is like the CEOs and the board is actually now knows that this is actually a revolutionary thing and we need to invest in it. So uh, what we are seeing is that the investments are getting unlocked, you know, more freely than before because like the awareness amongst the top executives. But the key is like not every company has this AI strategy or visionary or vision in place, and I think that is the missing piece. In some cases that it's kind of like wait and watch situation because lack of a visionary leader. So but the companies where we have the visionary leaders and they have a strategy in place, they're able to go and secure like the funding and to create all the infrastructure. The movement to cloud is going to be very important here. Large enterprises are still stuck in data center, and if you want to build any serious AI, you need GPUs and you need like access to all of these cloud infrastructure. So that's going to be very important, and so it needs some thinking change, in terms of how you approach it from a holistic point of view.
And I will add just a couple of things. I think there are two new roles being created in enterprises, and we have seen that occur with accelerating pace, in the last couple of years. One is kind of role of a chief data officer, whatever you call it, right? But someone in that domain who is able to articulate what a data strategy is for their own data and for their customers' data. That's really important for legal reasons as well as for innovation reasons. Innovation because you can use the data to create new products or to provide better service. So there is that data officer role. But something which has some overlap but not the same is a role about productivity or automation in the enterprise. And that is becoming key because enterprises don't want to talk about a new ERP system or a new CRM system or one of those applications. They want to talk about the outcome that is achieved. And the outcome is at the process level or at am I providing better service? Am I is my end-to-end whatever process is running well, as opposed to saying is workday running well. So that shift in mindset towards productivity and automation is becoming key to enterprise architecture. And the better we can talk to it, and the better we can articulate in those terms, then the better it is, easier it is to talk for all of us to talk to CXOs and the board, because that's the level that they want to talk at. So, and that at least the shift I have seen, increasing over the last few years.
Yeah, like I think it comes down to efficiency improvement, right? Like how much you can, like for example, one chief data officer I was meeting from a very large bank in New York, like was showing me a presentation that he prepared for his executive, where almost like across areas they were showing like a $500 million efficiency savings, and so I think like being able to articulate that value, like it's actually going to be very important.
That's correct.
Good stuff. Thanks, Prince.
Thank you, everyone.